Hello and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Den. I'm your host, Dio. Today, we're diving deep into a pivotal moment in the NFT gaming world, as Wolfgame finds its new home under the Pixel Vault umbrella. First up, a man who channels the relentless drive of Kobe Bryant and carries the Mamba mentality into the NFT space, always thriving when the odds are stacked up against him, Mr. GFunk. Next, a mastermind who's blended the thrill of high-risk gaming with the cutting-edge world of blockchain and DeFi, showcasing a brilliance that's hard to match, Goose Eggs. And rounding off our trio, a dedicated gamer who's turned his passion into a profession, embodying the spirit of the grind and hustle that every true gamer respects, Video Game Freak, or as we fondly call him, VGF. Gentlemen, it's an honor to have you on the show.
Happy to be here.
Yes.
We figured what better way to enter the Wolfgame ecosystem than through one of its very own. Been impressed with what I've seen on the pod so far, and so happy to be here to talk all things Wolfgame.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that for sure. It's a pleasure having you guys. I'll start off with GFunk here. So Pixel Vault's decision to bring in Wolfgame must have really had a strong reason behind it, right? So can you share what made Wolfgame a perfect fit for Pixel Vault's goals?
Sure. So, I mean, if you go back to really the origins of Pixel Vault with Punk's Comic issue 1, it was always about game theoretical decisions, attracting the type of collector and call it crypto market participant that is into analyzing the numbers and game theoretical decision making and competing with their friends and trying to find the most optimal strategy. Of course, you know, Beanie was instrumental to the foundations of Pixel Vault as he was with Wolfgame. And so there was a lot of, especially in the early days, community overlap between the Wolfgame community and the Pixel Vault community. You started to see that change a bit over time as obviously Pixel Vault's relationship with Beanie changed. But at its core foundation, I think the types of people drawn to the ecosystems are the same. And I forget who I was just doing an interview for, but they asked me why Wolfgame. And I said, I've always been drawn to projects that lead. And Wolfgame has never followed in anyone's footsteps, has always been doing its own thing and creating a path for others to follow. And I think Pixel Vault very much the same. Everything's not going to always work perfectly, but without the innovators, no progress is made. So I've always really respected the team for what they've done and the community for their openness to try new things. And so it just seemed like a perfect fit as we move forward into the next chapter of Pixel Vault and the ecosystem more broadly with what we're doing with the reboot protocol. So we see Wolfgame as kind of like crown jewel number 2 in what this protocol and ultimately decentralized gaming ecosystem will be.
Yeah, super interesting. And I know GFunk, you like to kind of be known almost as like the Willy Wonka, right? So you're kind of trying to mix and shake assets, and were you kind of the originator of the burn mechanism in NFTs, or?
Yeah, so at the start, I would say I was very much trying to channel Willy Wonka as much as I could. And unfortunately, the bear market has turned me a bit more into Bane from Batman, like I was born in the dark. So I've certainly hardened over time, but a lot of hard lessons that I think will make us much better for the next bull run. As to the burn and stake mechanic, from the jump, it was basically conversations that took place in Discord between Beanie, Sports Cheetah, and myself. We had connected through another community called Euler Beats. And actually, I started talking to Beanie because of a trade he did with Pranksy, like a really high value trade of CryptoPunks for serial number 1 Top Shot moments. Pranksy won that trade by a lot at this point, but he only had like 200 followers at the time. And I was like, damn, this guy is making big moves. The trade had to be worth, I don't know, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. And this was very, very early in 2021 when you just weren't seeing stuff like this happening much. This was pre-Beeple. He had done his everydays, but this is before like any of the monster sales started happening. I think CryptoPunk floor was sub 5 at the time. And so from a very early point in time, when we all looked at these NFT collections, we felt like a lot was being left on the table. Like, what is to keep someone passionate about an NFT if you're not interacting with it in any way? Obviously, if it's art, it's something entirely different. But I grew up a big baseball, basketball card collector. I would carry around my most valuable cards with me everywhere. I had the Beckett memorized, and I was always trying to pull trades. I would go on the weekends, hang out at the card store, and just sort of like talk the economics of baseball and basketball cards as like a 7-year-old. And so for me, those kind of fun decision-making processes where you have to actually think through your collection and shaping it yourself through your own decisions, that was always of key focus for us, in addition to leaning into the tech, the fractionalization of the punks and stuff. So the burn versus the stake was that first huge moment, I would actually say, in NFTs broadly. Now it sounds very basic, but at the time, no one was doing it. And I think you saw it set off a cascade of events to follow. So pretty proud of that one, but I certainly can't take sole credit for it.
Yeah, very humble response for sure. And you've been talking to the Shep kind of on and off for quite some time now, right?
Yeah, so probably goes back 14 to 18 months. I forget when Aaron came on exactly, but there was a conversation in the bull market. We obviously all realized the synergies here. And that original introduction came through Beanie. And we realized once we got onto a call with Shep and a couple other members of their team that our visions for what Web3 gaming could and should be was really, really aligned. And in a bull market scenario, it really just wasn't a way for us to make sense economically to sort of combine forces. And so now here in the bear, for better or worse, now it made sense. And we can really add some accelerant to what the Wolf Game community's been doing. And I certainly think PV is stronger for the partnership, as is the Wolf Game community. So yeah, it really dates back to the very early days of my conversations with Goose here and us sort of laying out to Wolf Game our vision for the future.
Yeah. And Goose, did you have an opportunity to talk to Shep early on too, or was it primarily GFunk?
Shep and I got into it on a couple occasions. Yeah, I mean, basically, before I was at Pixel Vault, I had been kind of in this mode where I was about to start raising capital for my own NFT company to do, basically most of what we're setting out to do with Reboot and Battle Plan. So, I had this hypothesis about, these kind of risky games where you use real good world assets and like the potential for those, when it, made sense for me to come on to Pixel Vault and kind of bring some of that here. One of my first conversations was with Shep, and it really highlighted, like, not only were those ideas kind of like, valid, like there's actually an audience for that, and like, a really, avid audience, like potentially like game-changing audience, and appetite for that kind of gameplay. And that, Wolf Game really stands out as, kind of a model, a proving grounds for a lot of those, like, hey, there's actually a different kind of game here that can be played with these kind of like tradable assets, and it actually opens up game designs that were otherwise not possible. Shep and I had a couple conversations that were really, I think we traded ideas back and forth. And, from my perspective, it was just like, I want to hang out with this guy all the time because we think exactly the same. It obviously didn't happen then, but I'm super glad to get the opportunity now and, manifesting some of those ideas even further.
Probably April or May of 22.
Yeah.
Now that I placed the time. Yeah. So it was a while ago.
Going back to the Beanie situation, I know it's like, oh my goodness, like literally beating a dead horse here, but Beanie's tweet coming out and talking about basically how the whole deal went down, how he almost felt slighted. One point that stood out to me was the mention of Shepard. Obviously, he said possibly staying on for a bit to ensure a smooth transition with Wolf Game. When I read that, I was like, ugh. but then you kind of went into the Discord and was like, no, this is not the case. So can you kind of just explain a little bit more just so the Wolf Game community can take a deep breath?
So one thing I'll say about Beanie is he will always put it in a way that is likely to get interactions. So my conversations with him, he certainly never felt slighted. I gave him a shout out for the introduction, but once he sort of reignited that conversation that Goose and I were having with Shep 16 months ago, he was actually not involved in the process at all. He would text me from time to time, see how it's going. But Shep and I were interacting directly for the entirety of the process. And so he really didn't have a lot of the facts as they were happening in real time. So as to what led to the transaction happening, I mean, what Beanie said is largely true. Shep, to his credit, and potentially some of his demise, seemingly every single decision in the company has flown through him. A lot of the people that work on the game don't actually communicate across channels. And so Pixel Vault is coming in and we're going to make a lot of changes just from a communications perspective so as to not have that singular bottleneck. But it had to have been a huge strain on Shep for a very long period of time, a lot of work. And in a bear market, when the company is significantly in the red month over month, it can be hard. He very much wanted to write by the community. And so he saw the opportunity to sort of allow for this acquisition, give him the freedom to step back from all the operations that was taking the drag on him. And really now his role is just to come up with cool ideas with Goose. And that was what made Wolf Game magical, was those sort of ideas, and not necessarily Shep needing to be the heartbeat of daily ops, So we're taking all that stuff off his plate and just focusing on building cool experiences that the community wants.
Yeah, great answer. When you're merging the two projects together, obviously it can be a bit tricky. How do you plan to mix Wolf Game's unique styles into Pixel Vault without really kind of losing what makes it special?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of art, aesthetics, style, I would expect it to remain largely unchanged. The pixel art is obviously the aesthetic that the community, the game, etc., is known for. There's the potential that maybe if the community wants, we can play with more detailed pixelated art styles if we want, or if we like the much more basic current style. But in general, we think you've got something good, so why mess with it? As for existing assets, we're continuing to learn about how all of them interact with one another. Obviously, it's a very complex game, but we have incredible advisors on the team. We have long time community members that either had very limited roles, unpaid roles, etc. previously that are now formally on the team. And so right now we're in watch, listen, and learn mode. I've mentioned previously that we're setting up a core committee, which has been incredibly important for the turnaround in Pixel Vault in 2023, where community members behind an NDA are really in the making of the sausage. Basically, what we've done at Pixel Vault is come up with an idea, create a business proposal of sorts, and pitch it to our cores, see how they react. And oftentimes they bring up points that we hadn't considered. How might this affect one sort of holder over another? It's always interesting getting the balance of voices from across the ecosystem. And there's a level of trust there that, no matter how much our community trusts and supports me, and really along with our employees, that's the only way I've gotten through the bear market, is that our core collectors have really shown me a lot of love and support through the hard times. No matter how much they trust me, it's different coming from the voice of a fellow community member where you really know your incentives are aligned, right? There's always a question, okay, Sean, he's the CEO of Pixel Vault. obviously he wants to see the business succeed. But another holder, they're in the same position as you. This collector is invested their time, energy, effort, and money into these assets. And that's the only way that these people are compensated as well. So knowing that they have a very like unbiased collector perspective in the room that they can trust when they say, yeah, things are being done, your opinions being heard, the team is open to feedback, etc., has made all the difference for us. And it sounds like from our conversation so far that that's what this community is really hungry for, is more communication with the team, quicker feedback loops, and I feel extremely confident that we're going to be able to do all of that. So we haven't committed to the changes. Certainly there will be changes. We think we can improve the game and add accelerant to the stuff that already works, make it bigger, better. But we're not going to rush in and do anything until we have all the facts, all of the voices heard, etc.
Yeah, I think that's the smartest move. It's almost, like you're slowing down in order to speed up rather than just jumping in and doing all these changes. Going into Pixel Vault and Battle Plan, right? Really exciting. I saw the gameplay for that, or the trailer for it. It was awesome.
One quick interjection before we move to Battle Plan.
Yeah.
Importantly, while we're slowing down in terms of the changes, we're letting the existing team run with the roadmap that Shep has laid out. So we're sort of doing both simultaneously so that the community doesn't have to sit waiting in sort of nothingness, but also prior to us implementing any sort of new things. Just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, which was kind of leading me into the next question, which was really that Pixel Vault with Battle Plan, you have a lot going on, right? And Battle Plan is probably the most important thing on on the planet for you guys, right? I mean, just to show that the game is fun. It kind of lends a lot to the credibility of Pixel Vault, right? So it is the number one importance for sure. How do you make sure that Wolf Game kind of gets that attention and that it kind of doesn't get lost, right, in the mix?
Right. So to that effect, obviously, we've added to the Wolf Game team from members of its own community. We're giving additional resources to the existing devs. Our team has already started communicating with their development team, sharing sort of information about Reboot, learning the details of their development process with Wolf Game, etc. So teams are already in communication. And right now it's about making sure that they have all of the resources they need to execute current vision as was laid out by Shep. And during that time frame, the teams will get a lot more comfortable in working with each other. And at that point, we'll have already delivered the protocol, V1, the first season of the game. And so we'll have plenty of team to go around to make sure that neither is lacking in resources. Because, like I said, an arcade is not fun if there are not multiple IPs, fun games that are a part of it. You don't just go to play a singular game, right?
Yep.
The whole virtue of the arcade is one token allows you to play and participate across a huge variety of things. And so the introduction of Wolf Game really drives that home. It's like, okay, cool. Battle Plan is awesome. It has a very distinct look, feel, vibe type of fun. And the team is playing it. The cores have seen Aaron streaming it live. I'm super confident that that game is going to be good and fun. And we already know we have a good and fun game in Wolf Game. So those two sort of like shining beacons to kick off what we hope and believe will be a very diverse ecosystem with a lot of different titles. I think it's critically important to have that second title, and then of course a third and a fourth, etc. But starting things off right is key for the success of anything. And so Wolf Game, I think, gives that opportunity.
Yeah. VGF or Goose Eggs, did you want to add anything to that, or?
Yeah, I mean, I made a lot of games, and I've actually like taken over ops on a lot of different games, like, you know, notable ones like Bejeweled, Plants vs Zombies, and some bigger ones like RPG ones like in the AAA days. And it's like always like, you know, you have to learn. There's so much built up around a game, especially a long standing one, about there's just like so much culture around it in the community. There's like everything that made it into the game, like there was a reason it's like that. And so like, you know, coming in like a wrecking ball and being like, I know all this, you know, I know how to fix this shit. It's always the wrong approach. You know, you just have to soak and like give it the time to understand sort of why those decisions were made, what's working, what's not, what the community like desperately wants, and then that's when, you know, when you can kind of understand some of that, then you can start having ideas about like, well, these are the things that maybe the community isn't articulating that they want, but we think will, you know, add to the mixture that's already there. But, you know, that being said, you know, we're in like active play testing for Battle Plan. But even in the midst of that, I spent all weekend playing Wolf Game. So, you know, it's just it requires time in the game to really show respect to the developers that have put as much time and the community that has put as much time into it. But then also, you know, figure out the best way to give back. And so it's going to be a process. You know, I've had a lot of ideas, and so far, you know, a lot of those are being validated by the community or the people that I've talked to and the devs in terms of, you know, how things could work. I'm going to be spending quite a bit of time with Shep and sort of just like kind of, you know, riffing a little bit, because that's sort of what it takes. Like I know that he has ideas about, you know, sort of what the plans were in the future, and I want to try and stay true to that vision as much as possible as we move forward. But yeah, you know, it's a fun game, and that's the thing with games. Like if you start out with something that people like and people love, which is even better, right? You can only do wrong. And so that's kind of the mode that we're in. Is just like, okay, we can only make good moves from here. We just got to make sure, you know, we got to learn as much as we can about it, and the community knows enough about the game that they can actually tell us most of the good moves that we need to make, at least in the short term. And then the kind of longer term good moves, well, you know, we'll get to as, you know, when the time's right.
Yeah. I think the approach is really good. I think in order to gain respect, you have to show respect. So just going into any new ecosystem where if a community does love something, it's like kind of, all right, so, you know, like nice and easy getting in there, but what would you do? And very important, kind of like a nice dance, right? And Goose, can you take us back to where it kind of all began for you and what ignited your passion for gaming and how that journey led you to Pixel Vault?
Oh, sure.
I'll ask him to hype it a little more than he usually does. He's very humble, but
he's a humble man.
Goose is a beast, so let's let him cook.
Yeah, it's a long story. But yeah, I mean, you know, my family's like a game playing family from the very beginning, and not just like games like, you know, let's sit around the play table and, you know, have fun as family. Like, let's use this game board as a way to just murder each other's egos from the beginning. And so stakes are always max. We find a way to make any game a money game. Cribbage, Scrabble, whatever it is, like there's a way that you can assign money to it, and it's just all of a sudden amps up. And then there's also like the psychological game that occurs across the board, which probably not so healthy for certain people, but you know, that's what I was raised in. And then, you know, I have this family member who is like, you know, really prominent in the gaming industry. He was the executive at Microsoft that created DirectX, which led to the Xbox. So basically kickstarted Microsoft's entire gaming strategy. I had the fortunate opportunity of being of an age where I could sort of ride along kind of on his journey through a lot of that. And I got to meet when I was, you know, a teenager, like John Carmack, Richard Garriott, Tim Sweeney, what's that guy, the Steam guy, Gabe Newell. Like, you know, we would just like hang out and go to dinner, and I would just be sitting there like the, you know, the kid just like listening in at, you know, sort of how they were essentially creating the new gaming industry from all angles, right? All those guys are both technologists and designers, and fixed in my mind this role of this kind of like highly technical game design executive business person as kind of an ideal for like, well, that's just like what the cool guys do. And so that was sort of my reference point. And then when I was kind of just out of high school, I got a chance to work at a company called Monolith, which they were kind of in the mix. They're kind of a younger company that was making 3D AAA games. And they were just starting out their journey from kind of like a developer that was working with publishers to get their games done to actually raising capital to become a publisher themselves and to start making their own original titles. I pitched as, I was like an intern game developer, I think 3 or 4 game designs to their like internal competition for like which games we were going to make next. They accepted all of them, and they told me not to go back to college and just stay there and become the lead game designer for one of their first titles, which was a game called Sanity Icons Artifact, which then got acquired by Fox Interactive. I was like 19, turning 20 in that time frame. And then this family member who was at Microsoft, he then started a company called Wild Tangent, which, I was like living in his basement at the time. And so I kind of transitioned from Monolith to help him with that. And then Wild Tangent ended up being one of the companies that was sort of led the forefront of this concept of like a casual game producer, kind of publishing house. And they also innovated all these technologies. So he took a lot of his work over from DirectX to actually build 3D in the browser for the first time, before there was WebGL, before there was Unity, before there was any concept other than like, flashing, blinking text in the browser, like, what you could do with it. And so I ended up designing and developing and programming like just tons of games for that. And we explored all these crazy business models for how to monetize games when you can download them. And this was pre-Steam. And so we actually had been building a game distribution portal for download games before, basically it was the first one for streaming, downloading games, all the DRM protections. We hit all the branches that Steam avoided when they first came out because they saw us go through it basically in that process. We developed ad optimized games, so games that you could play just by kind of like an ad-based token, free to play games, freemium games, like all these crazy business models for monetizing games in different ways. And that was ahead of Facebook games taking off, which then borrowed a lot of those techniques. And then it was ahead of mobile games taking off, which then like borrowed Facebook techniques, which had been borrowing from, stuff that we had done in the casual game industry. So I kind of got this like early retrospective of where the gaming industry was going. And then in that time, as they were kind of taking off, I went back to college and I finished a graduate program with, I was trying to get a PhD focused on network security and specifically around cryptographic protocols for games. So I was really interested in this idea of like, I like making these games, but like there's no money involved, which is what I desperately wanted to get back to. And there's all these troubles. This is like pre-PayPal, or like as PayPal was saying, like how do you exchange money online, and what are ways that you can, let's say, like not dodge regulations, but like work comfortably in a legal territory without running too afoul of regulations or gambling laws. It used to be like when you ran like all these multiplayer head-to-head games, it was all P2P hosted. Like someone would be voted like I'm the server, and all the game packets would go through that person, and that person could cheat because of that, because they're just like, well, I can sniff the packets and know what people's moves are ahead and write a bot to give myself an advantage. But the concept was interesting of that, you have this game state that has to be maintained. And the problem is like, there has to be some solution for what is the right game state. Like who shot first, right? Like who's on first is basically what it boils down to. And if you elect some centralized person to do that, then they have a huge advantage, right? And especially if there's games where you're exchanging value. And so I fell in love with the idea of like, well, what if these peers could maintain the game state without having to trust anyone, and in fact not having to know who each other are, and they could actually have money at stake. They're so confident about the sanctity of that game state that they're willing to bet on it. And so that was kind of what I was researching in grad school. And it was in the time when a lot of the research for cryptocurrency was kind of in its infancy, and a lot of the like original work like Hashcash and BitTorrent, like the distributed hash tables and stuff, was just kind of like, oh, these are kind of neat ideas. And so I was playing with a lot of those primitives, like for my own stuff at the time. And then I had then at that point moved on to, I got my master's degree, and I was like, well, I don't like writing research papers. I like making games. And so I started doing, started company out of grad school, basically hiring other grad students, because it turned out that most grad students don't like writing research papers. They like making video games. And that was my first company. And then that kind of like snowballed into a larger company called HitPoint, where, first I started just taking like contract development work and essentially starting a work for hire studio. The HitPoint was a much bigger org where we were taking on like full game development for full live ops for, Microsoft, Disney, EA, DreamWorks. And we also had all these deals from advertising. So we had some of the work that I had done at Wild Tangent carried over, because as mobile games took off, there's this need for all these ad-driven games and, way integrations into games with advertisers. And so that ended up being big business for us. And that led nicely into social casino, because that ended up being a big thing. We built this whole separate entity that was running basically back office and everything you needed to run and operate an online casino in, offshore and living within regulations and stuff. And we had separated out that business from the rest of our business because, it's hard to run a gambling business while we're also like trying to run projects for Disney, like under the same brand. So we had two orgs for that. And then, a couple of years, I had taken a step back and my partner run the business, because it sort of was in a kind of steady state where business was good. There wasn't a lot of like, we were still making cool games, but there wasn't a lot of like hard problems for me to solve. And then that's kind of what the time frame when I started a family. But I used that time to sort of get back into cryptocurrency and like, hey, all the stuff that I was messing with in grad school is now like, this is a real thing, except no one had built any good games off of it. And so as I was honestly just taking some time off, I was just running, my own self-funded research program to pick up sort of some of the ideas that I've been using in grad school for doing decentralized games and applying it to the blockchain. And so I developed like a huge number of these like little protocols or like Unity client for Ethereum, like way before, I think it exists now, but way before that. So I could actually have games talking to the blockchain and doing the state synchronization and stuff like that. And so that went on for a while. And then I had gotten to a point where I had gotten enough of these kind of ideas together that I was ready to launch essentially an arcade for doing this thing that Reboot basically does, which was sort of like offloads all of the risk for operating a skill-based kind of wager-based system onto a decentralized blockchain. So there was no central authority operating it. There was no one validating the states other than the players, and it essentially operated autonomously on its own. And at that time, a friend who I'd known from Wild Tangent, he was now a GM at Epic. He had taken up an interest in blockchain and wanted to find a way to sort of like integrate it into what Epic was doing. And so we spent a lot of time talking about, sort of inroads and, how we would do it. But then at that time he had like talked to Tim, and Tim was like, we're not doing blockchain. I don't get it. And so I got it, he then, my friend introduced me to Sean, who we knew through, I think, an investor connection. And, Sean and I hit it off.
Yeah, it's through Bain.
Yeah, through Bain. And the stuff that I had been working on resonated with sort of where Pixelvault, kind of where they're headed. And it just, I don't know, it made sense. And so rather than starting a company,
you came in and interviewed the team rather than us.
Yeah.
You.
He interviewed us for probably 6 to 8 weeks. Yeah. He was literally like working for the company already, but still like kind of interviewing us. So glad we
it was like, we want you, do you want us?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, I was hesitant because I wanted to be building stuff, not running a company, honestly. And so it's just a lot of trust that you got to put into someone that is deciding that they want to run the company. And it's just like, well, is this the person I want to work for? Is the right team? And Pixelvault ticked all the boxes. Sean ticked all the boxes. And here we are today.
Yeah. Dude, that's fascinating.
Similar to the Shep story, right? Yeah. He doesn't want to run a company either. Turns out a lot of the stuff I do on the day-to-day is not so fun. So
yeah,
his time is better off creating a protocol, creating games, and I'll take the BS off his plate.
Yeah, and you don't fully understand that until you go through it, right? And that's the best thing about being able to really to find somebody like a true professional. And when somebody is interviewing the company, that's the best case scenario. So that's really an amazing story, man. And I could go down a whole rabbit hole with you, talking about maybe heated fights with the family. I'm sure, you're looking at dealing with money and then you're dealing with the psychological stuff. That could be a whole another animal.
It's my grandmother.
He also,
she was the worst one.
Your grandmother's the worst one.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. My grandmother's the worst one.
That's awesome.
He also left off the fact that Hit Point and Lucky Point were acquired by Penn National Gaming, and his partner is basically running all of the gaming ops now for Penn. So,
yeah, all of that
pretty big deal.
ESPN bet stuff. That's my former business partner's. That's his problem now.
Very cool. So, looking at Wolfgame from afar, Goose, what kind of intrigued you about it? I believe that I saw you didn't necessarily play the game until recent, right? But what is it that kind of stood out? I know you talked a little bit about the risk factor and just can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Sure. So when I got started, and I started looking at Wolfgame, they had just finished the risky game. They had done the thing, you could steal sheep and minting. That was cool because that was all on chain. And that was sort of that was sort of the drum beat that I was marching to, was just don't trust anyone. If you're going to do games for exchanging value and there's risk involved, distribute. And so that was really interesting. And there was a bunch of games that had some of those elements already, I think on Binance that I'd been tracking. But I don't know, Wolfgame seemed to really hit the public consciousness. I think it was some blend of, when it came out, plus the characters, plus I think being on Ethereum really mattered. And then I had been tracking the alpha game, which is, I thought was so part of the games that I really love is again, the psychological aspect and the social aspect.
Yeah, the social.
Yes, there's the game on the board, but really the meta game and how you're interacting with the people and how you can work with people to sort of influence the moves that they make is actually the real power play, right? It's not I can move my pieces, but if I can get you to move your pieces for me, that's a whole different story. So those are the kinds of concepts that I liked and saw that kind of manifesting in Wolfgame as whoever is running this thing is he's working on another level, or he's at least he's doing some of the same things that I would like to see, I would like to be doing. And then, I'd seen Cave Game come out and, I like that too. I think that was kind of interesting because it's basically like a distributed scratch off ticket, which is honestly, that was one of the first games that we made. We made interactive scratch off tickets for the Kansas State Lottery or something like that. And so, that appeals to me, but it was also just that's gambling, guys. I don't know if you know this, but that's probably not okay. So that was, but the fact that people liked it and the fact that people were willing to put their time into it and strategize, and there's this whole social aspect around it, I thought was really powerful. And then, the game that I just started playing, which I know has been out for a while, is the Valley game and the Peak games. There's definitely some really cool stuff going on there too. And so, I think all of it, it's all coming out of the same mind, the same team. And so it's, there's a pattern there that I definitely appreciate and I definitely can follow. And I think there's more to be said there for sure that hasn't been said. And I think some of it is obviously I've seen how Pixelvault, kind of you have to be a little reactive to community and what's going on Twitter and, sort of adjust production. I think, we've suffered from that obviously, but then I think also there's aspects of Wolfgame itself that, maybe could have used a few more months, could have been a little bit more polished coming out, but that's life in Web3. So hopefully I think now, there's the advantage of that is the more you ship, the more you learn and the more feedback you get. And there's so much of that built up in the Wolfgame team and the Wolfgame community that the next strike or the next thing that you do can be that much better because of all that, whatever you just learn from the mistakes or you learn from the successes and the mistakes, right? But usually it's more from the mistakes.
Yeah.
Across the two teams, their combined experience in shipping actual stuff, some great success, some not so much, is almost unparalleled. across Web3. I mean, these are teams that have shipped tons and tons and tons of stuff. I'm super lucky to have our team. Wolf Game team has obviously been prolific, though small. Yeah, those learnings, both on to the good side and the bad, are incredibly useful as we try and take that next step into more mass adoption. First, we're solving for the needs of those that are here today, and then we can solve for, how do we really bring this to the masses? And to Aaron's earlier point, Pixelvault has probably spent north of $2 million, maybe more than that, on regulatory compliance, right? And that's not something Shep was really in a position to do. So we're looking to leverage all of these same concepts, but in a way that is regulatorily compliant so that we can build something of value for the future and leverage these games of skill that do combine that element of risk that I think attracts people to crypto, broadly speaking, certainly to NFTs. And it runs the gamut. Sports betting, you start with a love of the sport, and then you add that little element of added risk and added investment in the outcome of the game. And it just makes it that much more fun. So finding a way to empower people through their skill to add this wagering component is something Wolfgame has done great, and I think we're going to be able to take it to the next level with Reboot.
Excellent. So would you say that that's an area where there's potential to push the throttle a little bit?
Yeah, certainly. And to make sure it's done in a compliant fashion. Mm-hmm. So Aaron and I are already riffing in DMs. He's like, I've got some ideas. So we're already prepping a legal call for next week, specifically about stuff relating to Wolfgame. So making sure that everything is buttoned up, but that we're driving home the key things that attracts people to these ecosystems.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, so if we look into the tools that are being built right now, right, by the community, you have Val, who I'm sure you've gotten to know as of late. Some of the community members, there's some concerns with some of these resources or tools might be unfair, right? So how would you address these issues?
I think some of the tools that you're talking about, and it's actually pretty common for any popular game, like someone builds a bot or some kind of cheat overlay system,
min-maxing.
Yeah. And I think that there is and actually when I started out, like Diablo, there's like this whole community of people. Like I had been building, kind of like bytecode hackers, or I've been working with like this group of guys that were doing that, and it's just fun. Like people, it actually, in some cases, like it helps the game because it's also sort of surfacing features that if the demand for this thing is so high, why isn't that part of the game? And there's just like always this fine line. And that's what I think that was the discussion when we were talking with the Wolfgame team itself, is like, some of those things, they ended up in the game because it was just like, we need that, because clearly that enhances the game versus take away from it. And so I haven't played with those tools myself yet, which I plan on doing, but I think it's, I just gotta, it's sort of like a listen and learn and trying to understand sort of like, where is that line where it's just like, okay, is this filling a hole that should be filled by the game? Or is there something going on here that's like, that just makes the game worse for everyone other than the person that's running these tools. But I will say is also, my background with like network security and kind of cryptographic protocols and, hiding information or designing game mechanics in such a way that they're hard to exploit certain features, like certain aspects through play or through bots. And we're operating on, kind of in a cryptographic universe in Web3. Like there are ways to make some of those things harder or impossible, either through game design or good technology implementations. So, I'll be looking at it with that eye, essentially, is just sort of like, the most egregious things, can we snuff it out? And if anything that is just a feature that needs to be to the game, maybe we find a way to get it in there.
Yeah. And especially when we look at onboarding new players, making sure that, if you're a gamer and you hear that there's there's current players that are, kind of taking advantage of the system or getting different data that other people aren't getting, that could certainly deter some gamers from onboarding. So,
Yeah, for sure.
I think that's a great answer. And in Goose, you talked about how your idea of fun is demented. I mean, you have it seems like a intense grandmother, which, can you share your wild vision for Wolf Game and what areas of the game might be ripe for reimagination through your eyes? And, any thoughts on Cave Game coming back?
Yeah, I mean, it's true. It's just like I play every game like my grandmother would play it, which is like, no mercy. But I mean, I have ideas. I don't think I want to like share broadly any of those ideas yet because I think it's too soon. Like I literally just like started playing the game for the first time, started talking to the community within the last few days.
Come on, Goose, let's go. This is the NFT space.
Yeah, I know. I mean, and I know this.
No, I know it's crazy.
If Sean wants it, I can just say stuff, and then Sean can say like, cut that. But what I will say is like anything that Wolf Game's doing, I want to do more of that. Things that I love that are not like most games stay away from is like the concept of loss. Like the most motivating thing is like you have something that's valuable and you put it at risk. You can fucking lose it, right? Especially if you're stupid, especially if you're, not paying attention or, God forbid, just out of random chances. And so I think that those types of game designs and those ideas in the conventional gaming space, they do play with them, but they can never hit as hard as we could hit in the NFT and Web3 space with some of those ideas. And the other aspect is like this concept of scarcity and rarity and kind of like unique traits and ability. Yeah, like all those kinds of things. Yep. Like, so we play a lot in sort of Reboot in sort of like playing with the supplies of things, and we're like getting not actually us playing with the supplies of things, but putting it in the hands of the community. Like, here, we'll give you all these mechanics that you can just decide, how you want to use them. But all of them have a consequence that supply of one thing or the other gets depleted, right? And so it is essentially like the dots are a really good example of that, where it's really the community that kind of decides which things have the most value or how they want to value things. But then because every decision has this consequence, people can take a step back and observe sort of like the behaviors of everyone else and sort of like, well, I'm going to go in the opposite direction because if they're going that way, then I know all the valuable stuff will be at this end. And so Wolf Game has those ideas in its DNA from the very beginning, like, specifically of loss and stealing and, burning stuff, like sacrificing stuff for kind of a greater good or the potential for a greater good. So those are the things that I'm looking for as like, there's a spot where, can we push it farther? Can we make it, a harder decision or a more like, potential, a riskier, more rewarding decision is kind of how I'm thinking about it. But again, like in terms of like specific features and specific things, I'm not quite ready to say. The other aspect is this idea of risky play and this idea of playing with loss and playing with things of real value. I think that is a broader appeal than we've seen. Like, we haven't seen mass adoption for a lot of these, games that do this in this way. And, we have this like crypto barrier, but then we also have this kind of like built up culture around, like as you've been saying, like people have been stockpiling all the Wolf Game stuff. So now you have this like incumbent group of just like, we own everything already. So like, anyone that comes into the new space just gets crushed. There's ways to design around some of that. Like I remember playing when I was at Monolith, Ultima Online came out, and we had been like beta testers for Ultima Online, and so we were all like tanked up, And then we would just like get on conference calls and like camp out on the spawn spots that noobs would come in and just like mug them. Because every time they spawn in, they would have like 100 gold and like some valuable stuff, and we're just like, kill, take your 100 gold, get out of here, noob. And
Was
so
your grandmother playing that game or no?
I don't know. It was like a little above her technical ability, but yeah, I mean, certainly in spirit through me, she was. And so I think that NFT space right now maybe feels a little bit like that way as a new entrant. I don't think it has to be. I think there's ways like in Ultima Online, they made all these features where kind of like veteran players got an advantage for helping new players and stuff like that. And so there's like ways that you can make it a symbiotic relationship between players that are, kind of, whatever, fully tanked versus the new players, so that it becomes a fun part of the game for a veteran player to actually get new players in, or they can have some benefit by using the new players kind of as pawns on their board or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll be looking at kind of ideas along those lines as a way to open Wolf Game up and get more people exposed to kind of these kind of fun ideas that I like playing with.
Crazy exciting for sure. Let's go over to VGF. So what do you think makes Wolf Game special or different from the rest?
I've been like more of a passive observer of the Wolf Game ecosystem for quite a while, kind of lurking. I had the privilege of spending the weekend with a bunch of Wolf Game maxis out in LA. Vegan Patrick Amadon, I know he's a Wool maxi, and these guys kind of helped to broaden my exposure to the depth of how deep this rabbit hole goes. And you were talking about some of those community tools, like just the absolute like fervor that some of these community members dive into this stuff. Like, ooh, something new came up, like let's spin up the spreadsheet. And I was like, this is like my kind of crazy, right? Like this is like my kind of like dedication and excitement in and around, games.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was really cool to see the level of community embrace that the Wolf Game community has dug in. So like you were talking about, some of these pros and cons, I think it is a little bit of that razor's edge of you want to enable those fervent, hyper committed community members to be able to dive in and dig in, but not to the degree that they're able to necessarily be exploitive or have like this distinct advantage over somebody that might just be approaching the game. So yeah, I think like broadly its general appeal is that kind of nuance, easy to approach. It's, it kind of has this like superficial layer that, diving into Wolfwitz, I as a first time player over the weekend, I got to play with UMAD's kind of black market counterfeit cards, and getting to just play it for the first time, like having absolutely no idea, but jump in and play it for the first time and have fun, just kind of sitting across from somebody and throwing down, and then being able to see how this kind of layers up, right? That somebody's first exposure to the ecosystem, you can kind of get those hooks in that, the rabbit hole again kind of runs deep, that there's so much else to explore. So I won't pretend to be, all knowledgeable about Wolf Game yet, but it definitely kind of piqued my curiosity and my interests, and I'll definitely be digging in.
Yeah, that's awesome. And just the chance to create organic content, it's invaluable, and the creativity that comes out. I mean, I know Patrick Amadon, he's an artist himself, right? So he's always kind of pushing the boundaries with his art form and now shifting it into, the media end, which is really cool. I really love the IP end of it too. I know GFunk, you're big on IP, and that's really kind of, what originated with Pixel Vault. Can you speak a little bit about, Wolf Game and the ability to create some IP? I think, even just like with my Wolf, I mean, I'm, 40 years old and I'm rocking a Wolf hat right now. I mean, I'm, my son's in one, my 2-year-old's in one. It's insane, but I love it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's such a powerful component to fandom And it's really what drew me to NFTs in the first place. As you mentioned, Punk's comic was born out of sort of my somewhat unique look at the entertainment industry and starting to see all of these people leveraging their CryptoPunks to create brands around them. At the time, it was D's and DC Investor and Beanie and Von Meest and all these guys were known for their punk. G Money's Ape. So I thought, well, what if you took that really to the next level and instead you were treating these CryptoPunks sort of like a Hollywood movie star, right? Turn the punk into a character, into a major franchise. And coming over to the Wolf Game community, I mean, Shep the person, but also Shep the character is like a very well-known sort of voice and style and mysterious, etc. And so I think there's a lot that can be done with playing with those narratives and continuing to leverage storytelling, whether it's through social media or longer form, kind of like pixel art narrative storytelling. But certainly for now, it's way too early for us to dig into that because people have this vision of Shep in their heads. And so first, we really need to make sure to distill all of that before we can continue building out the world. Because, if you miss the mark on that character creation and it doesn't align with how the community envisions it, obviously that would be a catastrophic miss. So continuing to learn more and more about the world and the lore and the backstories. Obviously, I've been about as close of a tangential observer as possible with my proximity to Beanie and the crazy fervent explosion of Wolf Game in the early days. So I've definitely always paid very close attention and liked what the community was doing. But, I'm working 18-hour days or something stupid most of the time. And I think that's kind of what makes this opportunity so cool is that everybody on the PV side comes with that same passion, the communities, and so does the Wolf Game community. People work much longer hours than they are, contracted to because they love it. And we're all here because we love this. And so there's something that has drawn this group of people to these similar places, whether it be Wolf Game or PV. That fandom is very powerful. And so that's what we want to capture and elevate so that we can bring that to a much larger audience.
Mm-hmm. Very powerful. Okay, if we look into addressing some of the concerns by the community, a lot of folks are curious about WOL and its role, especially the new changes coming in. Can you break down how WOL will fit into the new setup? I know you kind of want to put it on the back burner, but obviously it's very important. I mean, it moves the whole ecosystem in Wolf Game. Right? Can you touch on that?
So I'll start with a preface and then I'll throw it to Goose. As you mentioned, it's very early still. So we are still in the process of understanding the complexities of the ecosystem and are far from committed to any singular path. That said, I think Beanie started this joke, the GFunk drinking game after. Who's the guy that was giving me shit for saying
UMAD. UMAD wasn't he?
Yeah, UMAD, yeah. And Beanie said another thing in the drinking game for GFunk is network effects. Well, the network effects of bringing these two communities together and aligning it behind a singular ecosystem rather than these separated ecosystems, the sum is much greater than the parts. And so we need to find a way to make this work. But obviously it doesn't work if we're gutting the community that loves it in the first place. So my preface is that obviously we take and hold very, very sacred the time, commitment, and money that the existing community has put into this. And we're going to find a way to make it work. A great example is with this recent UpDAO proposal and this huge transformation that Pixel Vault's undergoing as we seed the reboot protocol. There were a lot of really tough decisions relating to how planets would convert to GG, how POW would convert to GG, how punks would convert to GG, and balancing all of that. And we had I think, some pretty strong ideas, but it was that cooperation with the cores, as I mentioned earlier in our talk here, that got us to a point where when we actually released the final proposal, I mean, other than one prominent holder,
Almost
I think outside of
universally
that
well
one
received.
person, it was like 97% approved.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to do in a space like crypto. I mean, where there's financial incentives on the line, to have that level of a buy-in from the community that's holding the assets is damn near impossible. And we just managed to do it. So
Yeah.
we're going to take the same approach. No quick decisions were made. It was a lot of time, effort, and energy to make sure we got it right. But we're going to employ those same principles as we work on the integration of the Wolf game community.
Yeah. I think this just comes down to trust, right? I mean, just seeing what you've done with the core committee and what you talked about, 99% of the individuals were like, yeah, this is kind of a no-brainer. To have that is fascinating in the unforgiving world of NFTs. So there's no reason why that can't happen with Wool and Wolf game, the decisions that are going to come in the near to long term. So very cool.
And the community knew that the cores have, those people are not afraid to tell us if something sucks, you know? So having those voices in the room made the community a lot more confident that everything was considered.
Yeah, that's what you want. You don't want a yes man. You know, oh, you're the smartest human being on the planet. You want somebody to challenge you and push the boundaries and, you know, prove
That's
you
what
wrong.
makes the product better.
Especially in NFTs too, because like you within the community, you're going to have a broad spectrum of opinions, right? And reflections of holdings. Within the Wolf game community, you might have wolf maxis or sheep maxis or wool maxis, and those that are optimizing for plots or resources or what have you.
Yep.
And so having those voices, all of those voices considered and in the room, so that when that council or committee says that all of these voices were weighed and considered into these decisions, it's not just coming from the team, right? Because there is some layer of trust and accountability from the team sharing those opinions, but it is a very different, very different tone when it's coming from other members within the community.
Mm-hmm. Very true. I could envision some boxing gloves being pulled out at times, which would be fun, you know, between some of the really emotional characters. Then you got Goose over there developing some way to throw some money on it and to figure out where we can gamble this, who's going to win. When I was a kid, I was a little bit of a boxer. When I was a kid, my buddies we'd go in the basement. We'd only have one set of gloves, and they're all, you know, most people are righties, but it was funny. They were all like, all right, I'm going to take the right hand glove. And I always had to use the left hand. It was hilarious. So a lot of fun. But yeah, Goose, did you want to talk a little bit about that? I know GFunk kind of shifted to you, but.
And I think, yeah, like you said, you know, we want to be respectful of the existing game, but, you know, Wool must be won. I don't know why that has to change. And I think that, you know, folds into, you know, a lot of our philosophy for what games on the blockchain and Web3 games are going to be about. You know, I think, you know, more ways to win Wool. That sounds great. I think, you know, expanding the community so that, you know, there's more people to win Wool from. That sounds great. More utility for Wool, like more things to do with it. Maybe outside the game, maybe inside the game. That's where my mind goes. Like, I don't want to take anything away, but the idea of adding something or improving upon things that are working, you know, I think that's the zone that we want to be in.
Excellent. So Pixelvault has some big names that you're bringing on for advisors in the space, right? So how do you plan to use their expertise to make sure that Wolf Game stays in the spotlight, doesn't get overshadowed by other projects?
Well, just that like PV is but a contributor to what Reboot will ultimately become. PV is not Reboot. Reboot is not PV. From its inception, it's designed to be this protocol that is open sourced. We'll eventually have kind of these compartmentalized, you know, optional components, et cetera, these levers to pull that developers can leverage to build these exciting, game experiences that might not otherwise be enabled via traditional gaming. But these are advisors to Reboot, not necessarily advisors to Pixel Vault. Sorry, Sean.
No, that's a great point.
Yeah, no, I wanted to make that clarification. Pixel Vault and our community have obviously been huge contributors to the launch. However, it's been our very, very intentional focus to make this as decentralized as it can be from the jump. And so if you dig into the token allocations, Pixel Vault Inc. will only have 5% of tokens on its balance sheet. Meanwhile, the community off the jump will have over 42%. These advisors will be getting tokens, and that's intended to, one, give a balanced and wide-ranging perspective. And in order for that to be the case, these very significant people from across the space, they need to have some vested interest in wanting to see this ecosystem succeed. Otherwise, why would they want to build on it with us? And so having all of those voices in the room from inception, I think, is a critical piece to having the ultimate adoption of something that feels like much bigger than any single company or entity. And I think it is where ApeCoin has struggled. Obviously, Yuga has more resources than anybody. ApeCoin will be fine. I mean, just within their own ecosystem, I mean, with Animoca, they can create tons and tons of games. They have Gucci partnerships, etc. But what's to get Pudgy Penguins using ApeCoin? It's unlikely because of the branding associations, etc. So we wanted to create something that a Pudgy Penguins type project, you name it, there's really not a reason for us all to be creating different tokens. There's a lot of power in the network effects. And so trying to create something that was decentralized from the jump meant having these powerful voices in the room. And so far, we've only announced the Web3 sort of like business type advisors. Obviously, some media components with Rug Radio and DGen Network, Brycent with gaming, helping to provide some quality content off the jump. But we also have a very critical other component, and that's the artists and cultural trendsetters of the space, because nobody gives a shit about a protocol. It's more about a concept and a movement, right? So we felt it was very important to also have those voices in the room, people that you might not instantly think of when you think protocol. And so those people will be announced here as well. Super excited to have all of them. And yeah, many voices, again, not yes men, people with a whole bunch of different concepts.
Not paid shills, but actual contributors to the development of the protocol and things like that. So.
And they've already been instrumental in getting the protocol where it is. Each one has a specific area of expertise, I'd say, but a lot of people that are good at very many things. But certainly already just in getting to this point, they've been very useful. So I'm happy to have them, happy to work alongside them as we build out this vast ecosystem.
Yeah, I think that's smart too. And Web3 is literally all about culture. It's like the overarching theme, right? So, Web3 is also notorious for having very few gamers, obviously, at the current state, right? So would you say that that's one of your strategies to onboard people into the ecosystem? Are there other strategies that you're looking to employ?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's because most of the games haven't been fun. Also, for Wolf Game, it started off as requiring a pretty significant level of comfortability with the blockchain. And so abstracting a lot of those layers out and leaving the core of what made Wolf Game valuable, but also making it more accessible to a more traditional gamer is the path that we're looking toward. But we have to start by serving the existing community, solving for the Web3 natives' needs, and then transforming that into what can be brought to a much larger audience. But I'd be interested to hear how VGF and Goose think about this.
I'd say like broadly and generally, like, yeah, traditional gamers have, this stigma around blockchain enabled or Web3 games, anything to do with crypto, whether their excuses were the environmental concerns, which have largely been solved to a greater degree, or they stole all our GPUs, which definitely had some truth to it for a while, or that, it's all scams. In my mind, like, yeah, there are a lot of scams. There's a lot of scams via email as well, but we don't say that email is a scam. It's a technology that sometimes is leveraged and used to exploit people. That doesn't mean there's anything necessarily wrong with the technology. It's how people are applying the technology. And so I do think it is a little bit of an uphill battle, but via the means that, Sean had mentioned, I think that the attraction of dope games that are fun, people will skip over some of those hesitancies that they may have if they're friends, and some of the appeal of just playing a fun game, but also that there is some of this misinformation that is around the Web3 and NFT gaming bubble. And so I do think that there is some of that re-education needed, or in abstracting a lot of those blockchain layers away to make it more accessible and less of that, really steep on-ramp to onboarding. And so in my mind, like that's in, working with content creators, working with affiliates, working with some of these traditional gamers that these games may appeal to ease that on-ramp and lessen that friction to people that may not be exposed to our little corner of the internet, right? So like it's a little bit of a multifaceted and multi-path avenue in that direction, but we're kind of chipping away at all at the same time.
Great answer. How about you, Goose?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all that. And then what I would add is, like, for me, it's like, people go through any crazy hurdle to play a fun game. Like, that's like the launch strategy of any console is like, you lead with your strongest game, and, people will spend $1,000 on a headset for VR, or they'll, buy a console and like a special chair and like all this crazy shit if the games are fun. So like the technology hurdles are not, whatever. I'm a technology engineer person. Like there's solutions for all of that. But you've got to lead with the strong games. And I think even more so, it's got to be something that they can't play in any other way, right? There's something about blockchain that's different that you can't get in a Steam game, right? Because it's like objectively a different kind of play. And that's what I see in Wolf Game. And that's certainly what we're trying to go for in Battle Plan. Is like, this is the kind of game you just can't play anywhere else, because you need this technology to create a kind of game, a kind of feeling, a kind of, play that is, hasn't been done before, can't be done before. And yes, it's got to be fun, right? And so I think that, a lot of the game developers on Web3, like, it's hard to make a fun game, right? And then it's also further hard to sort of like, there's all these technology elements of the blockchain that are like a pain in the ass to figure out. And then like finding the good mixture of both of them is just like, fuck you. Especially for a traditional game designer, or a game developer, which they're already dealing with all this crazy stuff in their own set of nests of technology. But, the hope here is that, we do have something unique, right? And we found a unique group of developers and game designers and community members that are interested in solving these hard problems, right? And finding, like, how do we solve the technology problems and build something unique and novel? And it's super fun, super addicting on top of it. And that's it. You just need a few crazy people like that are willing to tackle that problem and make it cool. And I think with, the Wolf Game team, like, we found a whole new chunk of people that are just as crazy as us, trying to solve these same problems, and actually in a lot of cases solved them already. And so, we're going to be stronger. We're going to make funner games. We're going to make a reason to be playing on the blockchain versus anywhere else.
Awesome. Couldn't ask for more right there. If we were to sit down for another chat in a year, what achievements, developments, or milestones would you hope to have reached for Wolf Game and Pixel Vault?
For me, I think one, having our ecosystems fully integrated, having a game launch, etc., inside of a year is my expectation. But a lot of that requires our continued cooperation, conversation, etc. And there's been no lack of willingness on the part of the Wolf Game team or community to, really roll up their sleeves and tackle these difficult problems. So having this thriving ecosystem around shared economies and beginning the process for that next set of games after Battle Plan and Wolf Game, I think that's really where we're going to be looking in a year, because I feel very confident in the future trajectory of both of these games. And they'll obviously continue to grow, continue to have updates. We have a multi-season plan for Battle Plan. And what Battle Plan, in addition to being a fun game, is designed to do is show off the vast array of tools that Reboot has to offer.
Mhm.
And so with each additional season, we're going to be showing off different features of the protocol. And of course, we'll be layering Wolf Game on to do some of that as well. So showing off just the power of this shared ecosystem and beginning to demonstrate the power of the two communities working together and beginning to attract that much larger audience.
Very well said. VGF or Goose?
And did you say a year? We have a year?
1 year, and that's like 10 years in the NFT space, right?
Yeah, it's 10 years in the NFT space. It is not that long in game development time, but I would think a year you will be in a completely different spot. But I think I try and think about stuff like just like, okay, what is like the big macro thing that we're trying to achieve, and like, yeah, we've got to try to chip away at it in like smaller increments, because that's what humans can do. So I think that there is an opportunity to reach out to a larger audience, maybe through Battle Plan, maybe through Wolf Game, maybe a mixture of both. So I'd like to see more people playing Wolf Game, right? And I'm not sure we're trying to figure out the best way to make that happen. I'd like to feel like, so in the mobile space, which I hate, you deal with these like funnel dynamics. It's just like shovel anyone that will click on an ad at your game, and then just like churn through them to find the ones that will pay you money. And so like I don't think that's quite the right approach for these kinds of games. I think that there's audience already that would play Wolf Game, or like were already playing it, that kind of got turned off for one reasons or the other, that are like actually pretty easy to get at, so that there's like some easy wins, like just by some slight tunings to sort of like getting in the game for the first time, or like getting your first sheep. Like I know that there's all this built-in tech for doing delegation and stuff like that, which I think could be just leaned on harder to solve some of those problems. So I think that there's like some easy wins that can all of a sudden make the game feel much more welcoming, like much more approachable. But then I think in a year we'll kind of have our ducks in a row in terms of what the, I don't know, maybe this is like too much alpha, but like what the next Wolf Game looks like Wolf Game 2.0 looks like. What can we learn from everything we built this year and this past year, and everything they've built up till now, to sort of like, okay, what is the real game that we're trying to build here that is like goes everywhere, everyone wants to play, really showcases this risky rewarding play in a way that almost anyone can see and be like, I want to play that shit. That's sort of my vision for anything that we build at Pixel Vault, and certainly anything that we build with partners, is like, yeah, we have these like hard technology problems, and cry me a river, tell me about the entire world playing these games and choosing them over any other kind of game out there for some of the benefits that I think we all know that playing with real assets can potentially provide, that hasn't quite hit yet. That's where I want to get, and I think working with the Wolf Game team puts us like that much closer.
Love that.
I think for me, just like the inner gamer in me and the Web3 NFT advocate, that a year from now we no longer have the excuse that there are no fun Web3 games, that Battle Plan and Wolf Game on Reboot are shining examples of some dope games that you can hop on and readily and easily play. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to when we collectively no longer have that as a reason as to why gamers don't play blockchain enabled games.
All it takes is one. All it takes is one that's going to open up the floodgates for sure. Great answers, guys. I think going into just leveraging the communities, I think that what we have is, I've never seen anything like this. I've been in the business world. I've had my own business for 20 plus years. And it's literally, when an employee does work, it's most of the time they have their hand out, right? It's like, well, how much are you going to pay me for this task? Like, there's so many people in both of these communities that are willing to put their blood, sweat, and tears into something and just do it out of passion. So I just think it's so powerful. You can't find that in Web 2 and even for me, I'm like canceled all my business meetings this afternoon. I'm like, I'm freaking interviewing the Pixel Vault team. This is a freaking blast. I would stop anything for it, so it's really powerful. We're going to go into 3 mystery questions. All right. Putting you guys on the spot here. All right. So if the journey of Pixel Vault and Wolf Game was like a movie or a famous story, I'm going to start that over because I just sounded like I was going through puberty. Here's a fun one. If the journey of Pixel Vault and Wolf Game was like a movie or a famous story, which one would it be?
So, I mean, what started it all for me was Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And, well, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory with Willy Wonka. I mean, the sort of ups and downs and magical nature of it all and the level of risk. I mean, Veruca Salt turns into a fucking blueberry, right? So the NFT space is very much like that. You don't know if the choices you are making are going to pan out in the end. And I think that element of risk is what has drawn us all to this space. And we're only restrained by our imagination. And that's what inspired Pixel Vault, very much seems to have inspired Wolf Game, and has captivated both communities. The ability to participate in that and actually shape how the game unfolds, much like the people in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, right? I mean, you didn't know who was going to come out on top as they all went in, but a bunch of them made fucked up decisions, and then, Charlie wins. So very similar effects here. Can you outlast your friends and opponents? Yeah, adapting your decisions based on the choices of others. I think it's a ton of fun. I think we've got something special here. Excited to continue watching it play out.
Powerful. How about you, VGF?
In my mind, I went to what jumped to mind was like TV shows of like the Web3 like cannibalization, like the Web3 ecosystem eating itself. So I was thinking like
Walking Dead.
Huh?
The Walking Dead.
That's funny. But no, I was thinking like Breaking Bad or the Red Wedding. Just like everyone did, like may the best man win. But no, I think that and I'm terrible with some of these metaphors, but yeah, I think what Sean said that resonated with me there is, I think just that survival, that whether it be like the ups and downs, the redemption arc, just being around to have that next at bat and ultimately, be able to drive it home. You can keep going up, having those swings, making contact, maybe having a couple misses, but one of these at bats, we're going to tee up a home run.
Cool, dude. Awesome. Goose.
Yeah, I don't know. I was like thrashing a little bit, but I think I got it. Like, so the Predator, right? Like, so like you've got all these like Web3 founders coming into the jungle, and they're just like, oh, we're gonna fight like conventional wisdom and like, you know, this like impossible opponent, and they're just getting murdered. And then like the Arnold Schwarzenegger is like getting the shit beat out of him, thrown against trees and like half dead. And then he appears and just like, blah, you know, murders a predator. You know, like the whole jungle explodes. Like, you know, helicopter leaves, like, you know, kind of like that.
That's a good one.
Oh, I think that might take the cake. Yeah, I mean, they're all really,
Nailed it.
really good. That's awesome. Two more here. So for game developers listening in, why would they think about building on the reboot protocol?
Yeah, I mean,
I'll
so
go to my
that's-
tried and true one. Oh, okay, go ahead.
No, you go, Sean, you go.
I was gonna say network effects, baby. If you're playing the drinking game, you're drunk
Like
now.
literally.
If we're able to capture that initial community, right? PV has a very loyal community that's ready to be highly engaged in battle plan. Wolf game, obviously the same. And with our powers combined, we've got a really strong foundation for others that want to come and build in the space. And so being there early is obviously incentive. Having this affiliate network is an incredible boost for involvement of the community, of content creators, etc. Leaning into all these things that we believe should just be the foundational frameworks of how people are rewarded for their time, energy, effort, etc. So we think we've cracked the economic model. And so now it's just about people building fun games. And so if we've got the people there, developers will come.
Very cool. Goose, I know you were about to jump in.
Yeah, I mean, just running. I mean, you know, entering the space, that was my first kind of big question is like, what makes us different? What makes us unique? And like having run a game, like a couple of game studios and worked at a couple of game studios, like I know how the guys that operate these things think. It's just like, well, show me how you can help me find better, more valuable audience, you know, spend less time and energy and money acquiring audience, and show me how I can monetize, and, you know, basically make money off of the games that I've created such that I can make more games more efficiently. And I think that, you know, once you've kind of solved those problems, like the whole like mobile game ad funnel stuff, like that was one solution for it. It was like, well, we'll just use AI to search for people and, you know, throw them at your game and see what happens and churn and burn, I think is one solution. But I think what's interesting is when you have a marketplace and you design either a protocol or a system that can actually use the dynamics of the marketplace to help filter audience and create its own incentives by virtue of people that want to play games being able to be incentivized to do so. I think that there's a magic combination there. So like there's a big issue in games where publishers kind of make game devs essentially like race to the bottom on their pricing. So a lot of the economic models that I, you know, was part of, like free to play and freemium and microcurrency transactions and ad supported games, all of that are a way to essentially like get more audience into the game and give less money to developers. And so, you know, we think we've come up with a way to sort of flip that dynamic on its head, where it's just like, hey, we'll pay people to play the game and developers will benefit from it as well. You know, that feels to me like a magic combination where it's like, you know, we're not using dark patterns and like tricking players to give us money for meaningless items or like, you know, paying money to beat each other. But, you know, we're giving them a valuable, cool experience. They can, you know, theoretically take value from it, not theoretically, but definitely. And there's a way that developers can benefit from that and, you know, get the resources they need to make and continue operating the games and developing new ones.
Well said. VGF?
Yeah, having a couple of like these early conversations, like what sets it apart distinctly in my mind is one, like the hyperactive community and like player base, right? Yuga and ApeCoin threw out a couple of stats for some of like their early games, and it was just like off the charts engagement compared to anything in traditional gaming. And I think that is obviously a standout example, one, because there's very little to measure it against, but I think it shows how, fervent and passionate some of these fandoms and communities can be. So when you tap into that player base of people within Web3 or that are tapping into play these games that have something at stake, something to put up, something to risk and to win, it taps into like a certain kind of gamer without even going down the esports rabbit hole. That's an avenue that I see this kind of trending, is that like hyper competitive gamer. And so that's definitely appealing to a lot of game developers. So having this protocol, this network that developers can tap into to more readily build games of skill, leverage the tools that have been built, tap into the audience that's there, tap into the creator network and these affiliates that are willing and eager to develop content in and around these games. Sounds like a winning combination.
Yeah, for sure. Before we wrap up, do you have any exciting hints or teasers, any alpha that you want to drop for the Pixel Vault or Wolf Game team? I know we've dropped a fair amount, but
yeah, I mean, we fit like a month into a day last week, so we still do have some bullets left in the chamber that'll be coming out closer to launch of the protocol and battle plan. Obviously going to try and find ways to have the Wolf Game community involved in the launch of battle plan, but no specific alpha to announce today. Prizes will be awesome, so I think people will like it.
yeah.
I know I said too much already anyways, so nothing more to add.
I think just looking out towards the launch, excited for the community to get their hands on the game, excited to jump in with the Wolf Game team, the Wolf Game community. As far as you're prying for alpha, I don't know that I have much to share there. I had a bunch of people poking and prying me over the weekend, so I apologize. I got my good defense shell on at the moment. But I'm excited. It's all trending, in a really good direction right now. I think we've got a lot of momentum, a lot of traction going. Just looking forward to riding that in towards launch.
Yeah, I can tell you, I'm super stoked as a long-term community member. The past week has been really encouraging. I'm really excited to be a part of both of these communities and to watch us grow and also, lend a hand in this, and not expect anything in return and just, out of pure passion. So I appreciate you guys for coming on, taking the time, enlightened the whole audience with amazing alpha. And I think you've really proven and given the confidence to the community. So we appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for doing what you do for the community. Stuff like this is critical to the growth and development of the IP, the fandom, the ecosystem. So what you're doing is very valuable. And so we're appreciative of you having us on and being so welcoming and asking us the good questions to start off on the right foot.
Cool. Appreciate that. And that brings us to the end of another enlightening episode of Beyond the Den. A massive thank you to GFunk, Goose Eggs, and VGF for sharing their insights and visions with us today. To our viewers, your continued support means the world. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button to stay updated with our latest conversations. Remember, the world of gaming and NFTs is vast and ever-changing, and it's discussions like these that help us navigate it. Until next time, stay curious and game on.